Welcome to Transformations 2024. This is the first ever year-end podcast of Investors in People Philippines. I am Jerry Plana, and I'm joined by my colleagues Pinky Jokno and Janet Webster coming from the UK. As we reflect on 2024, in this particular podcast, we will share stories, reflections, and insights of what we've learned from 2024 that we can bring to 2025. So if you're a manager, a leader, or just somebody who wants to improve your workplace, this podcast is for you. So let's get started with this conversation. Pinky.
Hello.
Yes. One of the big things that we wanted first to talk about in this podcast is what do you see are some of the big shifts that have happened in 2024, if you just try to reflect on the year just passed?
I think we all know this, okay? The advent of AI and other emerging technologies, I think that's had a big impact on us, the way we work, the way organizations function. So that's one. And then post-pandemic, we've learned a lot from that. No? There's been a lot of changes in the workplace because of what happened during the pandemic, the experience that we've had, like we're shifting to hybrid. And having 5 generations in the workplace, that's also, a big change. When we used to have only 1 or 2, there are now 5, diba?
Yes.
So that's a big thing, and we need to be able to lead in circumstances like that.
Okay, yeah, I think you enumerated a number of them. I remember talking about AI when we attended
Right.
the last PMAP conference. A lot of the topics there were all on AI,
Right, yeah.
artificial intelligence. And I think the challenge we have when we talk about AI is how humans relate with these more intelligent machines, really.
True.
Some still look at it as a threat, others look at it as an advantage. I think we're still at that stage where we're trying to figure out how we can really
Yeah,
relate with these
yeah.
more intelligent machines.
Yeah.
Is that right?
We've had this discussion before, about making sure that AI, as we introduce it in the workplace, has to be responsible AI. Meaning, it should be used for creatively, and it should also be used in a way that, people understand what the risks that it brings. So I think it's very important for us to start upskilling people so that they know exactly what AI is for. We've seen it work in some of the organizations here in the Philippines, automating processes, organizations using it for recruitment, for skills assessment. Ang daming gamit di ba?
That's right.
But, we have to make sure also that we do not lose the human touch.
That's right.
Yeah. You've talked about that, Jerry.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, one opportunity I see with the rise of AI is we've really reflected deep within ourselves and said, what really truly makes us human? Now we're beginning to think about, what's so unique about being human as
true.
we face these more intelligent machines.
True.
And this is where we need to rediscover that, our humanity, so that we can focus on that, so that we can really collaborate well with these more intelligent machines.
Exactly.
So that's the AI challenge, I think.
Well, hello, Jerry and Pinky, and a Happy New Year to you and everyone. And it's very nice to be able to join you from what you can probably see is a rather snowy, cold climate of the UK at the moment. But just coming in on that issue of AI, and it's for sure it was the event, the ongoing event of 2024, wasn't it? Because it became so available to us. And everybody really needed to get on board. And as Pinky says, use it creatively and yet responsibly, because we've all heard, all of the discussions around the dangers as well as the advantages, I'm sure. But I'd like to just share 3 examples that come to mind of exactly what Pinky and Jerry are both saying about retaining the humanity, our humanity, and it being a benefit to humanity rather than a disadvantage when we use AI. And that's 3 organizations that I can think of using it in very different ways, but all in a positive way that recognizes the importance of the people as they do it. So one of them is PJ Lulier or Subrana Lulier, who have already introduced their own unit for innovation and AI. And one of the things that they're doing in that unit is training their people on the tools that they can use, the AI tools they can use to make their own process improvement, which I think is maybe, ideally a glimpse of things to come, giving people the skills and the tools and the empowerment to be able to do that. So I think that's a very good example. SIPSI, South Cotabato Integrated Port Services, again, another organization who are looking at AI and starting to use it for survey design for their employee engagement surveys, for example, or other surveys, and also for survey data analysis so that they can become even more efficient at their continuous improvement process. So another positive application, I think. And one more being MyNILAD, and they have for some time been developing a online learning system for internally, so the MyNILAD University. And by using AI, they've been able to reduce the time it takes from 3 months to 3 days in creating modules. So these things, they're all very positive. They're all helping people to work more efficiently and better, making it easier for people to work well. So these, I think, are really good examples to think about in terms of what we can do with AI, but obviously being so aware of the limitations, but keeping up to speed with it as it evolves.
The other thing that you mentioned was the generations. The generations, what sort of challenge do you see in this having 5 generations all at the same time in the workplace?
Well, I think the challenge is on the leaders. They have to be able to manage differently. Maybe manage is not the word for it. Lead differently, because there are different aspirations of each of the generations, different goals. So the leaders have to be able to respond to that.
Okay, yeah, you add the complexity to that by saying, we're hybrid has become more normal as a way of working these days. So leaders are not just managing different generations, but they're also leading remote workers.
Exactly. Yes.
So I think what we're beginning to see is the challenge for leadership is just getting bigger and bigger. So it's not easy to lead. Remote workers, different generations of workers, and things like that.
Right. And that's why, there's a lot of talk, especially among HR practitioners and even CEOs, the need to transform leadership. Because everything that, happens in an organization starts with especially the senior leaders, the top leaders. We have to have buy-in from them so that everything that, that cascades down to the lower levels is set by them. They have to model the behaviors, they have to model the values so that everybody else understand what's happening.
That's why I think the topic of improving the quality of leadership is becoming to be more and more critical these days.
Right.
We saw that in 2024, and probably we'll see a lot more of that moving into 2025 as we take an outlook of 2025.
Yes.
I think it really is interesting that we've mentioned both the 5 generations being in the workplace at the same time alongside remote working, work from home, because the two are really quite closely related, I think, and it brought it home to me recently in a discussion that we were having with a group of international organizations, investors in people worldwide, where we were talking about what are the challenges that leaders are facing these days. And this came up as the topic. And one of the things that was being discussed was, particularly, I think, in several organizations that were there, that Generation Z, Gen Z, as we call people in that generation, didn't want to take on additional responsibility like previous generations, such as millennials, for example, who are very keen to take responsibility early in their career. It seems to be a reverse in Gen Z. So that was a problem in succession planning, of course. How do you prepare people for the future and people for future leadership roles if people don't actually want that responsibility? And another issue was, this was particularly in the retail sector, where younger people didn't want to work in that sector because they could no longer work from home if they were in that sector, of course, because you have to actually be there physically if you're working in a store. So it made me start to think, if that's the case, if that's the trend, if that's how things will be in the future, maybe it really is time to be looking at how we organize our organizations, how we structure them. And do we need to be thinking about how we merge roles so that we don't have specifically people who can work from home and people who can't, but we have everybody who can work some of the time remotely and others have to be actually present. And that would be quite a big change in the way we structure work as we do at the moment. And the other is, do we need to be looking at the way our hierarchies are designed and changing that so that Gen Z actually can progress into roles that they would enjoy to work in, and maybe it's a different kind of responsibility. So potentially very big changes. But I'd just like to mention an example of an organization that in our community that is taking this challenge on board, and that's RCBC Bank Card. And they have a very good program which is about developing their leaders for the future, and it's called Leadership Circles, where all of their leaders, junior and senior and middle leaders, are all part of smaller circles where they can learn from each other. Lots of different elements to the program, but that's one of the essences of it that I think is particularly helpful. So there are ways to address these issues. I'm sure they're not going to go away if it's a generational issue that people want to work from home or want to work some of the time from home in a hybrid setting, and at the same time don't want the same kind of hierarchical responsibilities that we're used to, have been used to in organizations for so long. It doesn't have to be the same going forward, and I think 2025 could be a year when we really look at that.
The other thing that you mentioned there, aside from the generations and the AI, what was the other third dimension you mentioned when you were saying what shifts are you seeing in the environment?
No, we talked about it earlier. The impact of the pandemic on us.
The impact of the pandemic on us.
It's changed the way we do things.
Yeah.
Like we've shifted to hybrid.
That's right.
I think that's the way it should be going forward.
That's right.
I don't think just going back to the traditional model of working on site, face to face. This has to be hybrid, and I think that's also very important to employees. Meet them where they are, especially in our setting, the Philippines, di ba?
Yes.
Parang we spend a lot of time on traffic. There's a lot of aggravation that employees experience in traffic.
Yes.
So it's probably more effective and efficient for people to be working, on the hybrid.
Talking about impact of the pandemic, I think two things. I saw two things that created an impact as a result of the pandemic. One is the concern for well-being.
Right.
All of a sudden, well-being became top of the agenda in business boardrooms, as a matter of fact, because organizations are beginning to realize, you cannot talk about productivity if people are not well,
exactly.
Physically, mentally, and things like that.
Yeah.
So well-being became, something that was top of mind for many businessmen. Yeah. The other thing that happened as a result of the impact of COVID is leaders are now more concerned about the welfare of their people. That's why this kamustahans became very popular in a lot of different kinds of kamustahan. Kamusta ka.
Yeah.
It's not kamusta yung trabaho mo.
Yeah,
It's
right.
kamusta ka first
Right.
before we talk about your job. So
Yeah.
these are some of
Yeah.
the impacts of
Yeah.
COVID.
Right. Ongoing conversations.
Yes. Talking about the organizations, I know we've gotten involved with a few organizations within our community. Any organization that you feel stood out, or based on the organizations you got involved with, what were very striking to you in terms of good practice? How are these organizations investing in their people, Pinky?
You know, I've been very fortunate to have had opportunity to observe the people practices in, in, let's say, first Balfour. Okay. I am completely amazed with what they're doing to improve people management. They have outstanding people practices in Balfour. And a lot of what they're doing is because everything, the vision is very clear to them. Their mission is very clear to them. It's all shared up to the lowest levels of the organization. Another is NLEX, especially the way they develop their people. You have to see it to really believe, like how are they really developing their people, making them respond to the challenges of the business. So yun, NLEX, even schools like University of Zamboanga. Again, no, that's something that's which I think very excellent, no, that what they're doing. No? Kasi, schools especially have to be very good at what they do, which is educating. Kasi here in the Philippines, education should be something should be of great value to us, great importance to us, no? Because that's the only way people can move from where they are. I have to say this, no? It's the only way like people can transcend poverty if they have education, if they're properly educated. That's the only way that they can, come out of where they are. No,
That's
yung mga
right.
lalo na in the disadvantaged
Yes,
communities. And I think University of Zamboanga is doing great, no, as far as that's
Yeah.
concerned. Preparing their teachers, giving opportunities to their students,
Yeah.
working with the community. That's a lot of good that they're doing.
Yeah, talking about University of Zamboanga, I had the chance to visit them this year, and they requested a training program on coaching. Would you believe? Of all subjects, a school on coaching, and it really makes a lot of sense if you take a look at it. If you include a coaching style of teaching,
Right.
I think it's going to be very powerful, isn't it?
Nga,
You know,
yeah.
the kinds of good questions that you can ask to make
Exactly,
students
yes.
think harder or better. I think is a good blend. So the choice of the seminar that they requested this year for UZ is again something that is quite advanced for schools to be able to say there's something in coaching that we can probably integrate in the way we teach, or even relate with each other within the school.
Yeah.
Talking about some organizations that I have personally interacted with this year, SEC is one example.
Yeah.
SEC is
government entity,
a government entity, Securities and Exchange Commission. Is a great example of a highly innovative government agency who has been pursuing solid digitalization initiatives to support all their innovation, to provide better service to all their stakeholders. Aside from an RCBC bank card, who's a newcomer, we just recently accredited the RCBC bank card, who has had a very open environment, whose leaders are very approachable and accessible to everyone. That's why they're able to create this kind of climate of open communication also of the organization. These are amazing people practices that we've seen personally in the few companies that we've dealt with this year, 2024.
I'm particularly happy with what SEC is doing because it's government, and if we had more government entities like that, the Philippines would probably be in a better place.
Yes,
no?
I agree.
So professionalizing the bureaucracy, that's, I think, something that will be very valuable to us.
Yes,
Yeah.
and definitely when you're pursuing a digitalization strategy, it's very important that you take the people with you in that journey, isn't it? It's not all technology and
Yeah.
AI.
Yeah.
I think to a large extent, what makes that successful or unsuccessful will be dependent on how people are able to embrace all these many changes that are introduced
Exactly. Yeah.
to be able to bring about the objectives of digitalization.
Yeah. Yeah.
A category on diversity and inclusion, which enabled us to get to know some of the practices of the organizations in their network. And in fact, Manulife Business Processing Center was the winner of that category. And PJ Lulier, Savannah Lulier, was a runner-up, and I think Project Inclusion Network themselves were a runner-up. And finalists included organizations like South Star Drug, all of them with really, really good positive practices making a difference in people's lives. And going back to Securities and Exchange Commission, they have really focused in on sustainability as well. And wonderful that they can do that because they can really influence all organizations, or many organizations in the Philippines because of the role that they have. And not only that, they see themselves as being a role model. You know, they practice what they preach in sustainability. So doing some really good things in encouraging others and adopting sustainability practices themselves. And as you say, Pinky, large organizations like First Balfour, NLEX and Watsons have great practices, and particularly they have very good practices and are developing more practices on sustainability, awareness of climate change and what we can do to help ourselves in the future, and really making changes. And just another organization that comes to mind as I'm talking about this is Servicio Filipino, and that SFI, as we would normally refer to them, one of the things they're doing is bringing clean and green, should we say, cleaning materials to the Philippines for use in facilities management. So that's awareness of sustainability and safety and other issues. So all very positive, and there's many other things I think we could talk about in the good practices that our community has, and take heart from them, actually, because it's easy to think about the negatives that are going on in the world and sometimes forget about these really positive things that organizations are doing.
Well, just to be able to reflect on what we've been sharing, talking about specific practices of organizations that make them a people-first organization. Like in the case of First Balfour, what did you see as a specific practice that really impressed you, Pinky?
Marami
Yeah,
in
just if you could just
Balfour.
one example, top of mind.
The way they, a people first, they draw their talent from within. They develop leaders through their management trainee program, and that's who they sort of look after, they groom to take on leadership positions. No? And also their learning and development. I think there's a lot of good practice there, as they do in NLEX. No?
That's right.
Yeah. And also Watson's. Yeah, Watson's is also very good people practices there. Yeah.
Well, one good practice I've noticed that runs across many of these organizations we've interacted with is their use of cross-functional teams. More and more, we're beginning to see the rise of more teams being used to be able to get things done, because it's because of the complexity of the issues and the problems that organizations face these days. It's no longer enough that an individual will be able to solve all of this. That's why they're more organizing various teams to be able to address these complex problems.
Yeah.
So the way they organize that, the way they mobilize these teams is, I think, part of the good practice that's making them achieve a lot of things during 2024.
Right. And that's the way it should probably be, going forward. In your pathways to agility, you've talked about structure, right? Jerry, you developed that, right?
Mm.
The pathways
Mm.
to agility, flattening hierarchies for for easier decision making and for people to be better able to collaborate with each other.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's why this is probably one of the things that we've noticed now. Organizations are built hierarchically,
Mm-mm.
you know.
Mm-mm.
But do you know that the best way to get things done and satisfy the customer is horizontal? Is a horizontal. It's not a vertical thing,
True.
and that's the
Yeah.
reason why the teams need to be a more favorite, approach to be able to satisfy our various customers better. When we commingle all the different talents,
Uh-uh.
required talents to deliver a good service to the
Yeah.
customer.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's done horizontally, not
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
vertically.
Yeah. And I think that's the way, many of our companies in the community, the IIP community, are doing. No, they're flattening their hierarchies
Yes.
and encouraging more cross-functional teams. To increase collaboration. Yeah.
And just to add on cross-functional teams and the benefit of using those to address business issues, I think if we look at our organizations, one of the organizations in the community that's really perfected this is my NILAD. And they use cross-functional teams to really address major business issues, and I would say for them it's almost really become a signature practice.
So, talking about some actionable steps that other organizations may want to undertake if they want to be a people first organization, what would be some of your thoughts along this area, Pinky?
Yeah. Given the context in which we're now operating, no, I think it's very important for organizations to get their people to embrace AI. But like I said, responsible AI, not just AI for the sake of using AI to increase efficiency or productivity. But also making sure that they're balancing AI to improve processes, but also making sure that human intervention is still present, especially when dealing with the big activities like maybe big decisions that need to be made. Kailangan meron pa rin human intervention doon. The other thing, and very important, is leadership transformation. Maybe teaching the leaders, or maybe transforming them into true leaders. No, it cannot be just the management hat that they should wear. Actually, they should be wearing 3 hats. No? The management hat, the leader hat, and the coaching hat. So coaching is really very important, because they will take the lead in, building the coaching culture, which is, I think, the way it should be also going forward. And the other thing, siguro, that organizations need to focus on is, I've said this many times over, yung strategic talent management. That's very important. Like succession planning. We know some big organizations here in the Philippines don't have that. Kailangan talaga, you need to have succession planning, developing, building the leadership pipeline. You need to have successors, ready, competent successors to meet the business challenges of the future.
Yeah.
So yun.
That's right. I was listening just very recently to the PepsiCo former chairwoman, a woman chairperson. She was saying something which I think is very relevant to what you're sharing here in terms of what's the difference between HR work and talent development and management work. Because the usual HR work is just doing the payroll, administering the benefits, and coordinating some activities and things like that. But the real high value HR is when you're able to develop and manage talent, and this is where the succession system, talking about the future skills that's required, the leaders of the future and things like that. How you're able to do that, how you're able to assess, to train, to reward, to coach all this high talent value is talent development process.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think this is what you're saying. There needs to be more focus there. I
Yes.
think aside from
Yes.
the usual HR thing, I think the talent development process must be very robust in
Mm-mm.
terms of providing the needed talent for the organization.
And I guess that's where AI helps also, no? The HR
Oh yes,
people,
definitely.
aside from, making the transactional processes in HR more efficient. That also relieves the HR, especially the HR people of all those transactions, no? So they can focus on strategic
Yeah.
activities, no?
Okay.
How do they really help the business instead of just, doing leave recording or
Yeah.
timekeeping? That's not what it's all about, no?
Yeah.
It's really being,
Mm.
this is cliche, strategic business partners. But that's the reality. It should be that way.
Yes.